Welcome to Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor. Today we're doing something a little different. I hope will be just what you need as we head into the holidays. Rather than a coaching session, I'm going to talk through some common conflict scenarios that come up for lots of us this time of year and share some practical tips so you'll be able to manage them with confidence. I've asked my producer Mitchell to help with today's conversation.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, I think, a pretty common scenario. It's people who have to split time between different families during the holidays. So, for example, I'm married and I have my family and I have my wife's family. And I think we do a pretty good job of balancing our time, but I know it can be pretty tricky for a lot of people. So what would you suggest for people who are maybe feeling stressed or worried about making sure both families get equal time?
It's a very good question. I deal with it probably almost every year, being married myself and
Sure.
having actually a lot of family close by with some family dispersed a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I think the first thing is really to plan ahead, meaning don't wait until it's November. Think about it in terms of, say last year you had kind of a disaster, or we came from a scenario last year where my husband and I, we have family that lives close enough. We actually went to 2 Thanksgiving dinners, and it was a little much. We were there physically, but by the second dinner, we just weren't
You were
really
just spent.
participating,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So for us, we kind of figured out, let's not do that again. So based on your previous experience, the planning ahead starts with what just happened? What did we just go through? And what do we want? So the first part is really in your inner circle, which is maybe a spouse or another very close family member. You do this planning, but it's kind of like a negotiation. And I believe it's from Covey, who said when you're disagreeing about a value or an activity between a family member or another close associate, you use a scale, maybe a 0 to 10, meaning, say, me going to my parents' house for, a certain celebration is an 8. And I may say, hey, Mitchell, we're just pretending, this is an 8 for me. And then you say, hey, for me, this is maybe a 2. So you might accommodate me in that particular holiday.
Okay.
So the idea is make kind of a list of the key events that, both families are asking you or you're kind of required to make an appearance at. And then you go through your own values in the inner circle, and then you can kind of communicate that with a united front to the others outside. That said, you're going to mess up. I say it because one Thanksgiving, I thought, hey, let's divide and conquer. In my youthfulness with my kids, my husband and I went out to California for Thanksgiving and he stayed with his family. And that was probably the worst Thanksgiving of my life.
I could see that.
Because it didn't meet, I was married, I have a family, and that family togetherness, even though I was with extended family, it didn't transfer over for me.
Right.
So you've gone through the planning ahead. You've decided with your inner circle what you think is important. You've used kind of a scale to gauge between each other how important these different events are. And then you learn from both your successes and your failures that maybe next year we're going to switch off, but you have a few different tools to use instead of just doing the same thing every year until you kind of find a fit. So I think what people often get, the trouble is we think that there's some perfect way to do this. And it's actually, it may work for a few years and then we shift, say, as our kids get older, but allowing ourselves to kind of come together again in our inner circle, reevaluate and see what this year's going to be like and what could work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what about this scenario, Emily? Say you have someone in the family who really likes to go all out, maybe in the gift department, lavish, expensive gifts or really elaborate activities, just big kind of really committed things, right? But say other people in the family can't match that or don't know how to. They want to do cheaper things or want to spend more, quality time with each other. That's not necessarily like a big activity. I could see the person who really likes to go all out feel like people don't care enough about the holidays or show their care through expensive gifts or things. But I could also see the other people being like, hey, let's just focus on like the core of the holiday being with family. We don't need to do all this extra stuff. I could see some tension arising there. What would you say about that?
I think it's natural to have tension, especially when it comes down to money, right?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
is it this feeling of like, I can't reciprocate what, this other person, they've given me such a nice gift and what I have is just like this homemade thing, or it's, just cheap and they would never buy it for themselves anyway. So I think it's natural to feel the mismatch. What I think is interesting is oftentimes the person complaining is the one who can't reciprocate, or they feel like they can't reciprocate in kind.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty natural feeling. Gift giving is a source of social bonds. It's how we kind of connect with each other. And then we even know from the love languages, the five love languages, one of them is gift giving.
Yeah.
The research is really interesting, and I think it's worth talking about that gift giving, actually, the giving of gifts brings a lot more happiness than the receiving of gifts. That's just at least what the research says, that so in one
That's
way,
fascinating.
for the person who's not able to reciprocate, to say, hey, don't give me these nice gifts, may come like a slap in the face to the person who's trying to give a nice gift as a symbolic show of how much they care about the person, or, they love the holidays. So I think the first part I would say is understand that gifts are symbolic and they mean different things for different people, and that there's a tendency, if we can't reciprocate, to feel guilty and maybe even a little bit resentful that we can't offer the same kind of gift. What's another interesting point, and again, this is just the research that says thoughtful gifts, even if they're not on this like luxury level, mean more. So say, for example, in my family, I have a sister who's a wonderful artist. She paints beautifully with oil paints. And I'm always running with like a chicken with a head cut off, just running around doing stuff. So I don't feel like I have as much time to create a thoughtful gift, but I try to show my thoughtfulness through maybe spending a little bit more money. So almost any time you're talking about gifts, it's time versus money. So if you're the one who's feeling resentful that you can't reciprocate, maybe a first thought is, what do I have to offer? Right? Like, what's something that I could offer? Say I have time to make the family quilt out of, old T-shirts or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's just like about gifts themselves, like understand the symbol and don't falsely attribute to the other person that they're materialistic because they buy nice gifts, because that may be more about you. That may be saying more about you, that you just feel guilty, you can't reciprocate.
Totally.
But then there's this other sense of, especially in extended families, I think it gets really expensive. Like, I can't literally buy individual gifts for all, my siblings, plus all their spouses, and then the other side, my in-laws. So that can feel totally overwhelming. But symbolically, I want to do something for them. So some families just decide they're going to, that we have a rotation on one side of the family where we get gifts, for just one family.
Yeah.
And so that can keep expenses down, and then I can still cater my gifts in the way that I like to, and the other person will receive it personally. Another option in another side of my family, we just turned it into a white elephant party.
Oh, yeah.
Where we bring funny, kind of personally catered gifts. Like, I found an old Stanford sweatshirt, at a thrift shop, and I put it in there because I knew everybody would want something from my hometown. So it was something that was special and unique and showed care, but it wasn't overwhelming to buy for 30 people.
Yeah.
So I think that we need creativity, but we also need a sense of allowing other people to give gifts that they feel express the care and concern that they want without judging others as if they're materialistic.
Yeah. No, I really like that, time or money. What's the differentiation, I
Yes.
guess. Because, I think you're totally right that people who like to get really thoughtful or expensive gifts, whatever it is, it's the symbol of the gift that's important, right? And I like those ideas you mentioned with like the rotation or the white elephants. I think that it's a cool approach because it can get very overwhelming very quickly with just big families and people coming together. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just generally, the impulse to reciprocate is very strong. kind of almost feel like a Star Wars line, like the force is very strong. The force
Yeah,
to
yeah.
reciprocate is strong. So we've got to note when that reciprocating desire is in us, as opposed to judging the giver, recognize in us like, oh, like I feel like I should reciprocate. And I can't reciprocate in the same way, but I could reciprocate in my own way that expresses care. Like I could have that person over for dinner or do something special for them and even be clear about saying, I loved your gift. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you guys come over and, as our gift to you, we'd like to have this experience. Was something that you can offer genuinely without feeling like you were just kind of guilted into trying to match. It's the thoughtfulness that counts as opposed to the dollar. But
Right.
don't judge the dollar as if it doesn't express caring, because they're all just different forms.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this situation, and maybe this is something you've even dealt with yourself. There's a lot of prep and labor that goes into the holidays, and I think in a lot of families that falls on a lot of the women of the family, particularly the mothers. And I think oftentimes that labor can feel like it's been unrecognized in some way because, it's hosting, maybe it's planning meals, or the emotional labor of like hosting people, and like people are talking to you about their problems. They haven't seen you all year. Like there's just a lot that can really come to a head of a family like that who's doing a lot of, the prep work of the holidays. So what would you say about, the people who maybe aren't doing as much of the work, making sure that they're recognizing those who are, and then those who may feel unrecognized for their work they're doing?
Sure, I'm getting geared up for this right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Looking ahead to what's coming, and again, feeling the onus on me. And I do think, whether it's a cultural thing or whatever, I do think it falls on women, especially mothers, to create the magic of the holidays. So I think it's helpful to actually think about in conflict resolution, because it can become a conflict. Resentment is not something that's easily digestible and dispensable. So again, you can avoid, accommodate, compromise, compete, and collaborate in any conflict. What I think happens at the holidays is we over accommodate, meaning, when my kids were little, I'm the one who's, trying to prepare all this magic. But over time, say in my household, I have teenagers and young adults. They can pull their weight. They know about some of the magic, and they can create some of it too. So the first thing I really would recommend is taking an inventory, even just personally. That just an inventory, all it means is if I'm the one who's overburdened and I'm the one who seems to really care about this, these traditions, I'm going to write down what those expectations are. Activity by activity. Say it's, we have a caroling party, we do a Christmas card, whatever those things are. I'm going to write them down, and I'm going to figure out which ones really matter to me. Like personally, so say, for example, I do a Christmas card every year. I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of my mother, who sends out like 800 Christmas cards. I maybe do 300, which I think is a lot. But I know my other family members don't really care about that tradition. But I know I do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put a little asterisk by that one and say, regardless of whether someone helps me or not, I'm doing that one. And then there's some key things like, stockings and, Christmas presents, whatever those things are. I know those things need to get done. But I've got a short list now from the long list of the things that I definitely care about personally. I'm going to approach, especially if I have adult children, I'm going to approach them with some of the other activities that we usually do and just kind of survey them. And I'm going to clearly communicate. We have family meetings every week, and I know that's not everybody who does that, but even having, some family gathering that may happen in the next couple weeks to say, hey guys, I've kind of gone through some of our traditions. I have XYZ going on right now, and I'm pretty busy. What are the things that you guys could help with these different activities? And they may first look at me and be like, well, you're supposed to be doing that, right?
Yeah.
You're like in any type of conflict like that, we anticipate a little bit of pushback.
Sure.
But without getting aggressive, we may just say, hey, again, given XYZ, these are the things that I feel like I can handle. for you all, what are the ones that you find most important? What are besides the ones I'm going to take, are there things on here that you could actually offer to help with? And I have been greatly surprised by some of my kids, even say for Thanksgiving or Christmas, when it's not a threat. I'm actually just being clear and kind. But when I say like, I don't have the time to do this thing, they actually step in when they know that I'm not going to save the day. Because I think it's really a pattern. People just get used to what has always been. And so until we personally shift a little bit, nobody else is going to shift. And maybe you have the lame Christmas, right? Or some holiday where mom didn't do X, but she told you she wasn't going to have time to do it, and she didn't do it, but she didn't come in and swoop and be like, oh, well, nobody else said they would do it, so I'll do it so everybody won't be disappointed. But sometimes you got to have a little moment where maybe there's a lapse and then somebody else becomes motivated to step in there.
Yeah, and the next year, without having to be asked, they just go ahead and take care of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in any conflict or tension, you're going to have that moment of like, do I step in and save the day? But you have to give that gift willingly.
Yeah.
So I may decide my 5. I'm going to start on my Christmas card soon. Like I'm going to do it and nobody else cares. Yeah. But there are a couple things I can tell my kids will be like, what? Like, why aren't we doing that? And I will clearly communicate with them, this is what needs to be done. And I'll even share how to do it. But they've got to decide, especially as young adults, that they're going to offer something. So it's not you snooze, you lose, but maybe if you don't offer, it might not happen in the way that you would like it to happen.
Yeah.
Does that seem like tough love? I feel like it is a little bit of tough love.
Maybe. I don't know if that's too tough, though. Yeah. No, that's really insightful. I like that a lot. And I think something like that where you make a list and present it to the family is really smart, and also kind of shows maybe how much actually happens that, like, yeah, they don't think about, I don't think about Christmas cards. So I like the idea of bringing it forth. And then that can set a precedent for, this is what happens at the holidays, help on the things that you really want to make sure happen. So yeah, I think that's really insightful.
Yeah. I always think about that when I'm up late at night, wrapping presents.
Yeah.
I need to be a little more preemptive as well.
Yeah, cool. All right, Emily, well, I have another one for you that I think a lot of people face. It has to do with differences of belief and like your approach to the holidays. So for example, I think this is a pretty common one. You might have the older generation, maybe the people hosting, parents, grandparents, whoever, let's say Christmas specifically, they really like the religious, sentimental part of Christmas, right? They want to keep the Christ in Christmas, so to speak. Whereas they might have younger kids or nieces, nephews, whoever, that aren't as into that. They like the holiday, but they want to keep it more secular, still celebrate, still get together with family, but they want to, keep the religious thing, over here and the holiday over here. So how would you approach navigating that tension of, celebrating the religious holiday with people who don't necessarily care about the religious part?
Sure. I appreciate this question. And I actually had a good conversation with a young adult child of mine who's not particularly religious, but fairly respectful. And one of the things that he said that I thought was helpful, he just said, it's one thing to invite people into your home and continue traditions that are important to your family, but don't force other people or put them on the spot in ways that would highlight those religious differences. So say, for example, if I'm a child, returning to my family's, the home I grew up in, and my parents are having, a meal and they want to say a prayer on it, and they know that I'm not practicing right now a religious faith, don't ask me to do the prayer. Because sometimes it may be, the situation could even be contrived as if, okay, maybe we can put pressure on this child or this family member to do something religious that will kind of soothe us in the situation, as opposed to try to find the overlap, especially at the holidays, family togetherness. That's not necessarily just a religious value.
Yeah.
Service, helping other people, say you go to the homeless shelter or you serve a meal, those are things that don't have to be highlighted in terms of value differences.
Right.
They're ongoing sources of connection. The research is pretty clear about what we want to do when there's been faith transitions for certain members of the family and it feels fragmented. The danger is for people to drop traditions. So they'll just be like, okay, well, we can't do this all together. We're just going to stop doing stuff. And that does happen. Instead, we want to create sometimes even new traditions that focus and highlight the overlap we continue to share.
Right.
Service, love, family togetherness, fun activities where we go skiing or go to but again, I think the key is in the personal connections with others, we don't force religious participation where it's not appreciated, but we still continue family traditions. Say, for example, my mother, she attended Stanford University and she used to go to like a midnight mass when before she got married at the Stanford church. Okay. And that was something that was really important to her. And we don't happen to be, we don't usually attend the Stanford Chapel. That's not something we did growing up, but my mother really liked that. So we would often do that. And again, it's not necessarily my faith tradition, but it was something that was a source of togetherness because it was part of my mom's background.
Yeah.
And we could participate without having to feel like we were not acting like ourselves, if that makes sense. We just want people to feel comfortable and accepted and that we can find overlap instead of accentuating difference.
Yeah. So I think another part of that is, you mentioned the example of not calling on the person who isn't religious anymore to say the prayer. But if you're that person that's not religious, maybe don't necessarily say, hey, can we not pray? Don't lose that tradition. Just do it in a way that's comfortable for everyone involved. And maybe this is something my family has done in the past. I don't know if it's like a wide tradition, but like my dad at the end of Christmas will read Luke 2 out of the Bible. And if there are people that don't want to participate in that, maybe that's when they, do the cousin walk or something. And then those people who want to read Luke 2 stay and do that. So you don't lose that tradition, but it doesn't, become a source of contention necessarily. Sure.
I think one thing I'll just add, again, because I'm a person who's kind of the middle generation now. I have adult children and then I have, parents who are still alive. So bridging the gap of saying, they call it the intergenerational stake theory.
Okay.
The generational stake theory, meaning parents tend to care more about their relationships with their young adults than the vice versa. Like young adults tend to be like, hey, like if they're not doing what I want, I don't want to do, like I don't want to go. Like they'll cut out of a parent relationship much more easily than a parent. But with that, I would highly, highly encourage anyone, any family member to be respectful, to say, hey, like my parents, they pray and they're believing. Don't criticize them for doing that. Respect that just as you desire that respect.
Right.
So again, that reciprocity of respect generationally. So not just saying like, I don't do that anymore. But hey, when I'm in my parents' home, I observe. This is what happens. And I'm not going to criticize them for doing what they believe in, just as I'm hoping they'll respect how I live my life.
Yeah.
So have it be mutually reciprocal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good and wise.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I have one more situation I want to ask you about, and it involves balancing time between the workplace and your family during the holidays. You can feel really pulled between the two. They can both be very important. Work's important. It can get really busy during the holidays, but also you want to spend time with your family. How would you balance those out?
I think there's definitely this sense, even in the question, is like, I want to spend time with my family and I want to kind of like keep work at bay, right? So I think that's natural. And I think generally speaking, having a very clear calendar well in advance where you even put in time that might need to be allocated to either family or work.
Okay.
So you actually put aside, it's kind of like a time bank. Like we talk about that with like an emotional reservoir, but maybe a time reservoir is something that we look at very closely. I definitely recommend thinking back to, if you're with a current employer, you've been with them for 5 years, I'm guessing, what Novembers and Decembers look like. So it's not something you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen this year. You probably do have a pretty good idea of the patterns of stress or projects that kind of come to a head at that time.
Yeah.
So if you know that, you are calendaring time that is also sacred for work. I know that sounds funny, but sometimes we're like, well, my family time is sacrosanct. But we also may need to clearly articulate to our family members and say, I know I have this thing. I would love to, be on time. I'd love to leave work at 4 to come to this thing, but I know what Decembers are like, and I can't come until 6.
Right.
But I'm happy to come. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You want to make sure you still have a job in January.
Exactly. Yeah. So one thing is to plan time allotments that anticipate what Novembers and Decembers usually look like for you for work. So you're not caught off guard. You use the knowledge you already have of that situation. And then the other is, if you're the worker and you're trying to reduce tensions with your family around family time, you also have some boundaries of saying, hey, to be able to get this project done and really be able to take off for, whatever holiday you're going to be celebrating, I've got to have this commitment to time for my work, so that you have boundaries for your family time, which you scheduled in,
right.
But you also have boundaries for your work time so that your family has clear expectations. Something I also thought about was just, instead of assuming someone knows what your holiday plans are because you talked about it at the staff meeting or you talked about it in the family meeting, put it on an actual calendar that you share. So when that next, spontaneous fun party comes up and you're like, so sorry, that's when my projects due. Yeah. So the holidays already have a lot of surprises and unanticipated events and stresses. So to minimize that, we want to calendar in even time that's a reservoir so that you could handle some of those things that come as surprises. So it's not really a surprise.
Yeah.
You know there are going to be surprises, so you've...
anticipate them.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate all that insight. I think it's really valuable, and I'm looking forward to implementing it in my life this holiday season. So thank you, Emily.
Oh, for sure. Thanks so much, Mitchell. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today. If there's someone in your life who might benefit from listening to this episode, please share it, because as I always say, it's not a question of if, but when we're going to experience conflict, and we do much better when we're prepared. Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor is a BYU radio podcast. I'd love to connect with you on social media. Find me on Facebook and Instagram at Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily, where I'm sharing more ideas for working through conflict. And if you or someone you know has a conflict that you'd like to discuss on the podcast, send me an email to conflictcoach@byu.edu. And next time, I'll be coaching Spencer, who's feeling a mismatch between what he wants and what's actually going on in his life. I hope you'll join me.